Hi, my name's Jeremy Broon and this is the second video relating to the Alan Peters Online Furniture Award 2021. As there will be a virtual exhibition of winners and others shortlisted, I thought it might be helpful to make a video about creating an exhibition quality piece of furniture. It might be particularly useful to those woodworkers who haven't had a formal college training or trained at one of our furniture schools, as guidance in both designing and making. Now, as the online exhibition includes examples of work by the three judges, and I'm one of those judges, it made sense to me to document the creation of my piece, and I might add mistakes and all. So let me say outright, I would not expect my piece to be winning potential, but it should qualify as part of the virtual exhibition. Above all, my piece serves as a vehicle for highlighting key points and golden rules for an exhibition quality piece, and one that might be eligible for the award. From the extensive film footage, I'll make a longer, more detailed video and probably call it Design and Make Masterclass. On my observations, there are many masterclasses on traditional craft, but very few on design and making. That's integrating designing with making. Copying the past is much easier. Over the decades that I knew Alan Peters, I had the honour of exhibiting alongside him at numerous major group shows, and he himself judged me in my early career. So it's as though Alan is looking over my shoulder now during the creation of this piece, as indeed I am mindful of what he might have expected of me. Alan once told me that he thought we got far too stuck in tradition and that it's time to move tradition forward. So where do we start? While I'm doodling some ideas, let's have a quick word from the other two judges about the award.
For me, the most important thing of all is the design and proportion of a piece. It needs to look nice.
Absolutely. It has to please the eye, and it goes almost without saying that the piece has to be made to a very high standard. So what else is there to consider?
I always remember one of Alan's sayings was that he himself enjoyed making simple pieces, but making them well. So applicants needn't be put off if they think they've got to make a large, impressive piece. Sometimes a small item like a stool, if it's beautifully made with an interesting design, is a worthy piece.
And I would add that a design should say something new, even if in a quiet way. A piece should have a raison d'etre and be unique in some way, perhaps saying something new about material, technique or form. And yes, Andy mentioned that a modest piece will suffice, and especially so during this difficult pandemic virus in our midst. So the piece I'm creating is modest in size, as indeed my workshop is. Now, the emphasis of the award is hand skill, and both David and Andrew are masters at cutting dovetails by hand. Andrew could very well be one of the fastest in Britain. Well, I haven't cut a hand dovetail for over 20 years, but the dovetail is such a fantastic icon of woodworking history that I'm going to stick my neck out and explore this idea in my piece. I'm exploring the dovetail joint and featuring plywood that still has lingering prejudices against it as being a worthy material for furniture making. Incidentally, there's no right way to design. Now, I tend to take quick concept sketches straight to my workshop and maybe make a mock-up, but I tend to let the design evolve as I go along. I know that's risky, whereas others may prefer to plan ahead every detail on the drawing board or computer. Alan Peters would often make mock-ups of his designs. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking of his use of material. A strong feature of his was to use continuing grain in the components of a design, so the piece moved as one. So I'm thinking about timber movement, as plywood is no exception. Alan also made a feature of protruding tenons, as through tenons finished flush didn't remain flush for long. So timber movement was a big thing with Alan Peters, and one of the reasons his furniture stands the test of time. Now, what about the tools to use?
Today, even amateurs have a number of machines or power tools, so it's unrealistic to expect a piece of furniture to be entirely handmade. So we appreciate that timber is going to be machine planed, and various other processes such as mortises may well be cut by machine. But where we see handwork, it should be appropriate to the piece.
Well, it's interesting that fine furniture makers cut mortises by machine, but dovetails are cut by hand. Well, I started off with all good intentions, bringing my hand tools out of the woodwork, some of them over 50 years old from my Shoreditch College days. And I acquired a few hand tools from our first prize sponsor to mix old with new. And yes, here's a bit of history. This smoothing plane actually belonged to Alan Peters. Look, there's his name stamp. His widow gave it to me. Of course, he had much bigger hand planes as he worked on larger pieces of furniture, but it demonstrates you don't need the most expensive tools to achieve precise craftsmanship. Now, I deliberately used a fairly low-cost tenon saw and found it was just great. In fact, easier to control than a dovetail saw. I tried both and reverted back to the tenon saw. I'm not so sure about the Teflon coating, but it had a very keen edge and the set was just right. Tenon saws vary enormously and can be the difference between success and failure. And the test is the very first cut. How easy it is to get a motion going when there's not a lot of weight in the saw. Of course, the golden rule is cut straight off the saw, cut to the line, but leave the entire line on and always shade waste. Paradoxically, working on plywood, which tends to be looked down upon, was far more difficult to work than solid wood, especially when it came to trimming back the shoulder lines on my fairly large dovetails. I first scored a line with a marking knife where the chisel would rest, and I even made a simple jig for aligning the chisel square, but avoiding fibre breakout in the plywood was almost impossible. One of the challenges and satisfactions of designing what you make is to constantly ask, am I using the best tool for the job? So I use one of my routers, and a particularly nice little router that has no cable to get in the way and has excellent visibility. I've had to take the chipping guard off to focus my eyes on the cutter tip. I would say controlling this router freehand was more skillful than using a hand chisel. These were deceptively tricky joints to cut, and a good job I made a test piece first, because it was so short that it was virtually asking to delaminate and split apart when I prized the two parts of the joint together. And as I say, it should really be straight off the saw. I had to doctor just one pin with a chisel. And the most difficult task of all was right at the end in routing this tiny 1.6mm groove to depict the joints. I've used it before in my furniture designs. In fact, I first used it in 1978 on my zigzag table that Alan chose for a major exhibition. With the grain direction similar in the legs and top, the joint would have been almost invisible to differentiate the two pieces, whereas the tiny gap highlights the two parts, rather like the famous Michelangelo painting where Adam almost touches the finger of God and enormous energy is created. But also this provided the option for me to colour stain the legs and separate the two parts. Now I have a slight problem as I'm colourblind, so I asked for a little help from my South Korean friend who assists me occasionally on a Saturday. Now we experimented with water stains which penetrate much deeper than spirit-based stains, but they raise the grain, and whereas I wanted a blue colour for the legs, the yellow-brown of the plywood cancelled it out, so I'm not sure if this is going to work out. Others will be the judge. So with this example exhibition piece, I've explored two themes, the traditional dovetail joint and plywood, and I've used readily available Brazilian pine plywood, although one can never predict scarcity. Over the years I've participated in exhibitions which have had themes such as making this table to celebrate the 15th century explorer, Cabot. I depicted his name in marine-shaped sections using North American maple and circular in shape because he foolishly believed that the world was round. Now Andy Lawton has something to add about Alan Peters' observations and influences.
He had a great appreciation of nature and could see beauty in unexpected things. In this award, it would be lovely if we could get some entries which have that same magic.
In trying to keep this video short, I'll end with some captioned highlights that will give you a taster of the much longer, highly detailed video that I shall make of the entire step-by-step process of creating this small table. Just the finishing alone is a major aspect of an exhibition quality piece, but the finish has to be appropriate to the wood used and the purpose of the piece. I hope I've conveyed the essence of the Alan Peters Award in this video, and I repeat, I would not expect my little table to be a winning piece, but it should sit comfortably in the virtual exhibition and serve as an example of the things to look for, which, if you are applying for the award, should be conveyed in the high resolution images that you'll be submitting. In order to achieve high standards of workmanship, you need to sharpen chisels and plane blades a lot more often than you might think. You need to decide the balance between hand and power tools and how they can influence the design, and above all, the design has to work. Sometimes the design that works may appear to break the rules, but probably not. It just pushes the envelope. Of course, an attractive modern piece is likely to have curves in it, and that involves special techniques, and curves generally are quite time-consuming. I've kept my design deliberately rectilinear purely because of time restraints to get this video completed quickly to give applicants plenty of time to submit entries by the deadline. Well, I hope you find this video helpful, and even share the video to someone you know that might be interested and eligible in applying for the award. Thanks for watching.